Hey everyone, when AI first showed up in the technical support world, which is the world that I love and have been dedicated to for a long time, everyone thought it was going to replace our humans, our support technicians that we love. And I'll admit, as somebody who's been leading a 100 plus team of technicians, I was a bit concerned, honestly, which is why I decided to tackle AI and support directly over the past couple of years. I was like, if this thing's going to eat my staff, I'm going to have to figure it out first. But what I learned, though, is not what all the headlines were saying at all. AI is not replacing our humans at all, but it's amplifying them. It's making our support sharper and faster, and honestly, even a lot more human than it's ever been before. That's why I love this topic. Because it's not about chasing shiny tools. It's about learning how to make our people and our products better. And that's why I wanted to get a guest who sees this topic at scale from both sides, both as a support person and also as a business person and as somebody who's building a tool specifically for this person, for this purpose, who's built a product around the idea of AI in support and who I've come to really depend on a lot personally, actually. No one understands this topic better in WordPress than our guest today, Aaron Edwards, founder of Docsbot. And he's honestly one of the smartest AI support tools in the WordPress space. So excited to have him on today. See you soon. This is WP Product Talk, a place where every week we bring you insights, product marketing, business management and growth, customer experience, product development, and more. It's your go-to podcast for WordPress product owners by WordPress product owners. And now, enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I am Matt Cromwell at Stellar WP.
Hey everybody, I am Zack Katz from Gravity Kit.
That was a good impression. I totally picked up on that. And today we're excited to have with us Aaron Edwards from Docsbot. Aaron, welcome.
Hey everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show, and please tell the folks a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Aaron Edwards. I started in WordPress, at version 2.6. I like to go by version numbers rather than years. And started learning to kind of be a plugin developer, and I have my own like WordPress multi-site. And then I joined WPMU Dev and was with them for 12 years and starting as a plugin developer when we're only 3 employees there. And then until there was hundreds of employees, and I was serving as the CTO for almost 10 years there. And then started building my own kind of WordPress products. So the first one I built with a co-founder was Infinite Uploads, and that was kind of a WordPress cloud storage plugin, and ended up selling that last year. And now I'm doing Docsbot AI, and we've been going for almost 3 years now, and was one of the first AI support tools basically in the space. And because I was from the WordPress community and know so many people there, we have a lot of customers that are WordPress product owners, whether it's Stellar WP or Automatic or Osmotive or a lot of the big names, even Zack over at Gravity Kit, I think, is using Docsbot. So yeah, so it's been exciting exciting time growing that business and learning a lot as I'm building an AI and as things change so rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on. Folks, if you are here on YouTube watching live, feel free to use the comments for your questions or feedback. We would love to answer them live on the show. And also, do us one quick favor. Before we jump into everything, could you take a quick second and just click that subscribe button? Why? Because we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and you could really help us out a lot. Thanks a bunch, folks.
Yeah, and I thought I was subscribed to our show, and it turns out I wasn't. So I subscribed, and I'm really happy to be notified whenever a new episode drops, because there's so much to learn. And even on episodes I'm not participating in, I love this show, and it has so much good stuff. And speaking of good stuff, Aaron, AI and customer support. Can you give us an idea of where we're at? Like, what is the state of things in AI powered support?
Yeah, gosh. As Matt was just kind of talking about, is we have, like, when I first came out, it was basically the same week that ChatGPT API became available at all publicly. This is right after ChatGPT existed. And it's been kind of, I was lucky enough to be kind of at the very beginning of it, when kind of this new invention of LLMs and chatbots, and being able to use RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, to kind of pull content from your documentation as context to provide answers. So I was basically one of the first, like, I think maybe three of us launched within the first few weeks of that becoming a possibility. So that's really helped with the business, growing and everything, being one of the first to the space. But now the space is full of a million, low quality competitors, and some really high quality competitors that
Yeah.
luckily are much more expensive than me. But it's been an interesting growth time, and learning that, and also trying to keep up with AI technology. I think I read like a stat that basically, since we launched, like, the amount of knowledge or intelligence that you get for your dollar has more than 100x, and that was last summer that stat came out. Now
Oh
it's, I
my
think, even
goodness.
more now that we have GPT-5 and things like that.
Yeah.
The amount of knowledge and power that we're getting, so that's been good, like, financial wise, but also it makes it really hard to run a product when AI is changing so rapidly and the technology is changing so rapidly. And then you have things that make my heart stop when you see, okay, oh, ChatGPT is releasing Agent Kit. Is that going to kill Docsbot? Back in the
Hmm.
day, it was ChatGPT releasing GPTs, and then you have Google coming out with their own products. It's like, how did I get in this place where I'm competing against Google
Yeah.
somewhat directly, right? um, but somehow we managed to stay ahead by keeping things very, I think, focused on the customer support use case, and very opinionated, I think, in some of our architecture decisions, to make sure that we're building tools that are actually useful for our ideal customer. So there's been a lot of adjustment and growing in there, and people like Matt have been super helpful as being a customer himself, of giving the feedback and showing, okay, what do people who are actually in this customer support space really need, you know,
Yeah.
and how
And I
do
want to kind of give a summary of what Docsbot does, because I don't know if people know. What do you mean
Good call
Docsbot?
out.
Is it just ChatGPT or something? Like, well,
right?
kind of, but no. Uh, the For Gravity Kit Docsbot, for example, you can go in there and configure a bot. You can configure multiple bots, but each bot is, sure, let's call it a custom GPT if you've used that before, where you can have its own instructions for how it should respond, and then you get to provide it with data sources. Now, with ChatGPT, you have to like upload files and stuff. One of the amazing things about Docsbot is you can point it at dynamic sources and say, okay, I want you to read all my blog posts on my website. I want you to read, um, to check out our YouTube videos, to check out our Help Scout documentation articles. I That's all cool, right? That's all public stuff. I also want you to read all of our Help Scout tickets and
Hmm.
incorporate those into the responses. And I
Hmm.
was worried about that, right? Because one of
Hmm.
the problems when you're doing support is there's a lot of personally identifiable information. There's a lot of like email footers. I
Hmm.
mean, Help
Yeah.
Scout is pretty much 90% horrible email footers.
Hmm.
I was worried about how well Docsbot would handle that. But one of the things that Docsbot does, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, is that it kind of summarizes each one of the tickets and provides a summary response for each one of the tickets and uses
Yeah.
that as the data source, not the actual raw ticket information. So if your customers are emailing you, username and passwords, they shouldn't. They should be using trusted login instead.
Yeah.
Then that information doesn't get integrated into the Docspot summaries. So you have one bot that
Yeah.
is trained on all your different data sources, and then you can communicate with that bot. They have API integrations. They have Help Scout integrations using webhooks to like add autoresponders and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
you can set that up if you want to. Um, what am I missing, Aaron?
A great elevator speech, Zach.
I
um,
see you got a
no, but
screen share here. Should I pull it up?
yeah, you can. I can. show just a little bit. Like, here's my Docsbot that we're using for our own dog food and our own customer support. So you can see I have it trained on like our latest new feature blog posts. So it's kind of up to date with like the latest features. We don't have it trained on every single blog post because that's just kind of too much general, information and stuff.
Okay, hold
But
on
we
a
have it.
second, Aaron.
Yeah.
I want to, let's get into this. What is the right amount of information to train on? Because one of the things
Mhm.
with AI is that it gets overwhelmed if you provide it with too much information and not enough context. Like it needs to have a good information to context ratio
Exactly.
there. So, what you're only doing the latest news? Why?
Yeah, I have it tied to only our feature updates thing because our entire blog, I mean, we have some articles that might be useful, but it's general stuff about AI, general stuff about customer support. You don't want to pull in too much context. You want to kind of keep it focused to what the answers are, for a bot. Um,
Mhm.
so we don't do the entire like blog, but and then I can add like specific site maps. So like here's just like pages, specific pages. Like on our site, I could have it scan our entire website, but we have things like um, landing pages for specific industries. We have things like our AI model library, which is not really super useful for like our customer support use case. So
But isn't
using
it if
Docsbot,
people
you can.
want like a preset? Like, how do you? I would be worried that they're missing out on something we've already written about, and like if they're asking for a AI template, or if there's somebody that like is in an
Yeah.
industry that you already have a template done for them.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. You can add anything. My general rule of thumb is add anything that you think could be useful,
Right.
for responses. But what we found normally when people have like a blog or something, it has a lot of stuff that often is out of date,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing like feature announcements, things like that.
Yep.
So limiting it by using, for example, our feed feature to only the latest like announcements, that's useful in our case, because we have feature announcements that go way back and those things have changed slightly, since those initial announcements.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of different ways of doing that, and then we have, just like you're talking about, we have it trained on our Help Scout tickets. So I can see, I have it set, I think, going back the latest 3 months, and that's a something that was tricky for us to learn as we were building these kind of features, where we can train it from connect it to your help desk and train from past tickets. Is A lot of times your answers change over time. Your staff's answers change over time, even if they are kind of like the gold standard. Um, that changes, as your product changes and things like that, and as your team does. So you can automatically say, okay, I only want to index the last whatever X months of tickets, and then we'll go on through there. So I can see it actually found 1,100 tickets um, that it scanned, and then after passing all those through an AI to kind of summarize and try to turn them into FAQs, it turned that only into 750 individual kind of FAQ items that are generic and such. And then we also like read the images and things from the ticket content and stuff, and if that's kind of useful. So
I love that. I
um,
I also was like hyper concerned about the Help Scout part of like training a bot on our Help Scout. So I was like, we're actually in the middle of trying to make our technicians provide better answers.
mhm.
And so there's a lot of not great answers in there. So I don't know. It's like a little bit of a garbage in, garbage out
Yeah.
concern. You know what I mean? But we first had it also at 3 months, but then we brought it down to 1 month, and actually the
Okay.
responses improved a ton when we did 1 month instead of three.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it maybe is just because we had a better concerted effort at improving our responses overall in that
Yeah.
most recent 4 weeks. But the one thing that I thought was really fascinating was what we'll do sometimes is if we notice a particular problem comes up, we'll quickly put together kind of like a canned response that we know is accurate and that we know that customers have had success with.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, like for example, with LearnDash, they it's pro only, so you can't just roll back to the previous version very well. And so if there's a
Mm,
problem with a current release, we'll sometimes be like, hey, here's a a zip of the previous release, roll back to this previous release. So we had a canned response where we were sending folks this thing of like, oh, this is the problem. We know what's going on and we're going to fix it. And here's a link to Dropbox where you can get this zip. The bot totally picked that up and was providing the link to Dropbox. And it was doing it accurately, like when
Yeah.
they were expressing the exact problem that we were trying to solve. And all of our support technicians were like, see, it's putting us out of a job.
Well, and if your job is responding with an autoresponder, I think that's
Yeah,
like not that that's your job. I'm saying like that part of your job you should be not
yeah.
doing. Like that,
Nobody wants to do that. It's like,
yeah.
oh, now I got to do
Yeah.
the here we go, blah blah blah, bling. Like that's not work that makes you excited. And that's the way I talk with my support folks too. We're kind of getting ahead. We're all support nerds here, so we're
Yeah.
getting ahead of the game a little
Yeah.
bit. But
I mean, the point is, if the answer is already known, from your docs or from your recent staff responses, why would you not automate that? You know,
absolutely, yeah.
that
So
that that boring rote work that you just do over and over, and that gives you time to focus on, better customer conversations, reaching out, dealing with the more complex debugging issues.
yep,
One of the things that we've found to be challenging, and we're working on this, and like it's something that I want to improve on for the rest of our the business life, right? Like this is not just like a fixed set in stone process. Is how to tell Docsbot and how to tell these other AI agents like Help Scout's built-in AI chatbot
Hmm.
which ones are the best responses, which ones
mhm,
are um, the ones that should be used as the standard response
Hmm.
yep,
for this question. Because I don't know about y'all, but when I review the chats that our customers have with Docsbot, and I embedded Docsbot on our support page above our support form so that people can
Hmm.
interact with the chatbot and try to help themselves if they want to.
Hmm.
When I review those chats, they are meandering. They are all over the place. They get one answer to one question, and then they just ask the next question, and it
Hmm.
it becomes about 15 different chats, and it's all in one thread. So how to turn that like there's a lot of noise, but there's a lot of value in each one of those responses and each one of those questions, and yet breaking those into their own independent atomic units is kind of
Yeah.
difficult. How
I'd
do
love to
how
I'd
do
love to show that off, yeah. That's
yeah,
a that's a very good point. So, we kind of have 2 different ways. So we have, like, our conversation logs, um, where you can see, like, the entire conversation that the user had with their bot, and that can cover
yep,
multiple topics, as you said. But then we actually break down within that conversation individual, like when the AI determines something is a question or it needs to
right.
look up information, we break that down separately. So we actually have two log formats. And this, I don't think any competitor has this, to where you have your questions and you also have your conversation logs. And so that way
Right.
we can collect stats differently depending on if it's conversation based. So you want to say, okay, in a conversation based, we want to see kind of just overall, like how well the conversation was able to answer the sentiment of that, counts, deflection rate, whether that conversation led to escalating to human support, things like that. And then we also keep stats separately, just by question, so you can kind of look at it at two different ways. And that makes it kind of tricky to know exactly what you're looking at. We're trying to figure out how to communicate that better, but it
Right.
does help. To have both of those data points to
yep,
analyze.
Yeah,
yeah,
and understanding support trends is really one of the things that we're trying to do. And
Mm.
I believe that DocSpot does some of this. If you have the business plan, perhaps it has the topics.
Yeah, we just launched our conversation topics. So
Mhm.
basically, like you can let the AI automatically determine topics, or you can preset specific like categories. And then basically, after a conversation has been idle for a certain amount of time, we automatically summarize that into a summary for you, so you don't have to read the whole conversation in your logs. And then we also classify it by sentiment and also topics. So that way you can see overall like what your topics are, and then you can also see over time like how those things are changing. So that's something we're playing with, like figuring out the best way to display that to users. But yeah, that's definitely useful stuff to know.
love it.
So another question I have, Aaron. Okay, so we all have. Hey, product owner, if you don't have good docs, you need good docs.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's like step one for the AI revolution is have good documentation. Allow your AI to be trained on it. Um, but my question for you, Aaron, and for Matt is like, okay, so how do we format docs to be best uh, 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 ingested by AI at the moment? Like,
Yeah,
what's the latest thinking on how to write docs? Is it one
yeah.
big doc with everything? Is it little docs? Like, how? What's the best way to improve retrieval and search and things like that for your AI
Yeah. Well,
bots?
first, let me correct your assumption because
Oh,
now that we can learn from tickets, you don't
Mhm.
necessarily need docs.
well, that's true, but so
Yeah,
should we not then create docs for based on the tickets that we have?
we should. Yeah. But I think one of the first blog posts I ever wrote after Docsbot was like, customers never read your docs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which is sad but true. It's a very, very small percent. That's why AI Answers is so useful because it can take the stuff you've written that's maybe your gold set of truth, and use that to answer like specific questions for the user automatically. But as far as like how to format your docs, definitely like what we found almost every kind of what we call this retrieval augmented generation to where let me break down what that is basically.
Yeah.
We're not training a whole new AI model on your documentation. Basically, we're indexing like the data sources that you add, whether it's your docs or your past tickets or scanning your website, uploading files, whatever it is. We have like more than 20 different data sources that you can use, even like podcast episodes, videos, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So you input all that, and we create a vector database basically. And basically, it's just a fancy way of searching those docs. So first of all, we're stripping all the extra junk, whether it's the headers and footers and nav in your website, or in email threads, stripping all that information, and then we try to convert it all mostly to Markdown format, which is basically a very like heavy text base, but it maintains things like headings and lists and tables and stuff like that in a way that's easy for the AI to understand and that's really token efficient. Um, so you have that kind of training database, and when a user asks a question, then the AI agent basically in the backend says, "Okay, I need to look up information to answer this question." And so, based on the question, we're using agent-based retrieval now, so where it's actually looking at the whole context of the conversation and it's saying, okay, I'm going to run anywhere between, we have minimum 2 search queries, but sometimes it can run 10 search queries in parallel. So if they have a complex multi-part question, the AI is actually determining, this is what something like Perplexity does in the backend that you don't see, saying, okay, to answer this question, I need to look up, okay, what is pricing for the pro plan? I need to look up uh, information about this specific feature and this specific feature and this integration, and so it's performing all these lookups on the back end, and then it's combining all that into kind of a list of results that's provided to the AI so that it can form its answer. Um, so that's a basic description of how it works under the hood. But knowing that helps you kind of format your docs because sometimes we'll see with users where they are trying to use it kind of in a way that it's not really designed to. Like maybe they have like a huge long PDF file or something and then they say, okay, I want you to summarize this entire PDF, and extract these data points, or or even like they'll upload like a spreadsheet or something, and then they want you to perform like math and advanced analysis on it. It's like that's not really what we're designed to do because it's never going to see that entire document at once. It's going to instead try to find the specific chunks of text that um, are most relevant to provide that answer.
Yeah.
So basically, like anything that's closer to like a FAQ format, or where you have
Yeah.
especially like well designed, where you have headings and then maybe paragraph bodies, that go along with that help you kind of separate those chunks and make sure it's very clear to the AI what the topic of that is. That's really helpful.
Yeah. That's that last part there about FAQ format. To me, that's been the stuff that I've found the most success with, is trying to formulate the content of the issue in a question
Mhm.
answer format as much as possible. Particularly
Yeah.
a question in a in a way that normal people are asking that question. And that
Hmm.
only comes by analyzing a whole bunch of questions, which it makes it kind of like a circular process. Like we are monitoring our Docsbot logs like every day, and we look at the way that people ask questions, and it's like, oh, they asked this question in just a different way enough that it didn't find the answer that all these other people did find. And then we were like, okay, well, are we going to hone in on the bot with a Docsbot also has this really great QA feature that allows you to improve the bot responses by saying, like,
Yeah.
basically giving it an FAQ source. Um, are we going to do that, or are we going to go straight into our docs themselves and tweak the way that we word them so that they are closer to the way that these people are asking that question or not?
Yeah.
That's what we found. But the reason why that works for us is because we don't have to worry about all the things that Aaron said that Docsbot does before it ingests all of our content, which is that he's stripping out all the content on the page that doesn't matter. And that's also, I think, a really big point and a big key is, our websites are full of a whole bunch of information that's not necessarily relevant at all.
Yeah.
So it's a big benefit to what Docsbot does, I think.
And I've
That,
heard that's the same for like this GEO or like AI optimized SEO that
yes.
everyone's talking about now.
Yeah.
Is they say a key is like reformatting your content to be much more kind of FAQ,
Um,
condensed,
I
question
mean,
answer based, and that's a big ranking factor for AI answers now.
100%. It's the same as what it has been with Google for a while. They have been talking about that EAT model, and it's very, very similar. You're looking for the same types of authority and authenticity in the voice and tone and all that. I do think Google's general EAT model idea, even though it's kind of controversial because a lot of folks felt like their websites tanked from organic results when that rolled out. I do think that it's the right idea overall, and I think it's highly valuable to AI as well. Um,
I do wonder. So I completely agree. My question to Aaron, and maybe Matt, if you know this as well. Okay, so do you do an FAQ doc that is one per product? Do you do one per
mhm.
one per question, where the question itself is the title and then the answer is the
Hmm.
body? Do you
This is
have them?
something.
How do you have them grouped? Like one of the things we've been discussing at Gravity Kit. Okay, I want every single setting that we have in the entire plugin documented, and then
Hmm.
okay, so that's something we need to have documented just because that should be documented. But then questions related to each one of the settings as an FAQ kind of thing. It seems like maybe each one of the settings should have its own page if there are any questions about the settings that are related to it. How do you think about structuring all this stuff? And related, because this isn't a big enough question yet, our co-host Ian asks, how does DocSpot handle situations where I'm supporting like 50 products from one inbox?
Yep,
Yeah, well, that's good.
that's a
Um,
conversation Aaron and I have had multiple times.
yeah. Um, so just answering yours first, Zach, is I just think like um, keeping it like even just you're having like a web page and you're just having like a header for the question and then a paragraph for the answer. I mean, that's usually great. We do have ways in DocSpot where you can like have more control over how the data is ingested, and we call that like a raw data format. And basically it's just a spreadsheet, and it says, okay, here's the content, here's the title, here's if you want it to like link to a certain place, if it's using this source, that gives
Is
you
there
kind
any
of
way to
full control.
prioritize those? Like saying that weight this more than the
Yeah.
others? Yeah.
Yeah, currently prioritization is based purely off like semantic meaning. So you
Uh-huh.
have the step where it's doing the semantic search, and some weight is given to keywords too. And then after that, you have a re-ranking step where the AI kind of determines, okay, out of this big list of results, what are the most likely to be relevant? And then it actually gets passed to create the answer. So some of that is a little bit of a black box that we have little control over. Something we're going to release soon is like metadata filtering. So you could say, and this speaks to that question that I think it was Ian just asked. Um, is that oftentimes you may have multiple products and they have kind of very different segments of your documentation. Right now, you kind of have to train a different bot for each one. And then in your integrations, whether it's the widget or in Help Scout, you can map, okay, let's say if I tag this conversation for this product, then it gets routed to this specific bot to write an answer. So that's the way it
Mhm.
works now. Because each bot is its own kind of library. But in the near future, we're going to have actual like metadata, so where you can categorize your sources and say, okay, this set of sources is for this product, this set is for this product, and then the AI naturally, based on the conversation context or clarifying with the user, can determine, okay, which filters do I need to use to only look up documentation about this specific thing. So that'll be
Yeah,
very helpful in that.
very
But it does
helpful.
work now by just doing different bots per product.
Yeah, I will say I've had some success with this. So we earlier this calendar year launched a brand new product called Stellar Sites, which is the culmination of what Stellar's been working towards for a really long time, which is a hosted environment that comes out of the box with Cadence and Cadence blocks and Cadence forms and solid security and solid backups. And often it will also come with Give and LearnDash. So all of these things are all in one environment and one support desk, essentially. So coming out of the gate with that, I wanted to make sure we had a great, strong AI first touch for all of our support there with Docsbot. And Aaron and I have been talking about that subject for quite a while. What I did in the end, which I find to be relatively successful so far, is I did two big things. One is I wrote a knowledge base doc only for AI, a doc that was written for AI specifically, because we had docs for Stellar Sites, but not like a giant ton of docs. And we had a whole bunch of more features and little nuances and things that weren't ready for public docs yet, but were great for AI to know about. So I wrote that first. And then in our custom instructions, I explained really clearly that if from the context of the question, it's not clear to you which product they're talking about, ask them which product they're talking about
Yeah.
before you give an answer. And it
Mm,
actually did respond really well to that, to those instructions.
And
Sometimes a little bit too well, like that. I feel like the context is perfectly clear. Like, of course, this is
yeah,
cadence because they're asking about a block, but it's not perfectly clear to the
yeah,
AI. But and so it would stop me like, wait a second, are you talking about give here? What are you talking about? And they're like, no, dummy, cadence. So, but then the
yeah.
conversation moves forward from there, and it worked out okay.
And
I
we have a customer that does this too. They have a whole bunch, like more than 100 different products that are like generators and things like that, and each one is its own separate PDF manual. And so they actually in their custom instructions say, okay, before answering, ask them what the model number is,
mm,
and then it won't answer or perform a search until they confirm what the model number is. And then the instructions also say they control the search. So they say now when you search the docs, always include the model number in your search strings. And that
oh,
helps
interesting.
find the relevant docs kind of in a more agent-based way.
Yeah, I don't do that. That's a good tip.
this relates to this conversation as well. Ian asks, what mechanism should we use to identify missing documentation? When I was developing Gravity Kit's custom instruction set for our Docsbot, we have the ask, if you have any questions about, like, if you don't know what the customer is talking about, ask them what product they're talking about.
Hmm.
And then make sure to only use any short codes from this specific list of short codes. And I've hard coded a list of the short codes that we have available. We have a docs with filters. One of the things that AI loves to do is make up things that don't exist that probably should. It's really good at coming up with short code names that should
It's
exist.
not hallucinating them, yeah.
One of the things that I saw that when I was reviewing the questions and the answers that Docsbot generated, and this isn't because of Docsbot, it's because of AI in general, is that it would often have different short code responses than existed. So not only
Mm,
clarifying what the product is that you're talking about, but also if you do find that you have issues with hallucinations or whatever, make sure to be clear on a given list of items that are available for the AI to respond with.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
Aaron, do you have some customer stats that you want to show us? Like,
Yeah.
I'd love to see more about,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, let me
whatever you want
first
to show
answer
us.
Ian's question real quick because I think
Oh
that
yeah,
was a good one. He asked, How do you know? Oh, there. How how do we use it to identify missing documentation? So, two ways: the AI automatically classifies whether or not it was able to answer
Mhm.
the user's questions. So, in your question logs, you can filter to only questions that the AI couldn't find an answer to. So
Yep.
that's, and you can even export that as a spreadsheet, so you can analyze it. And
Yep.
then on our business plan, we have a question topics report. And so that actually once a month, it looks at all the user questions that it couldn't answer or that had a poor rating by the user. And then it uses AI to kind of turn that into topics. So main themes and then sub themes. So you can say, okay, my documentation or maybe just my product user experience needs to be improved in these specific areas.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I want to pause right there and highlight this that something I keep trying to say in a lot of different contexts. I have found so far that the whole AI first touch chatbot, knowledge based bot experience is not and never should be a set it and forget it kind of situation in my mind.
Mhm.
All the things that Aaron was just highlighting are things that my team is doing on a daily basis, going through the logs and looking for the things that the bot can't answer, and then trying to decide whether we train the bot deeper or we update our online documentation. And then they go and they update that documentation. And then that cycle keeps going back because now we have better docs and now it informs the bot better. Now, hopefully, it
Mhm.
can answer the right question going forward until we find the next group of questions that it can't answer well. This to me is why I said at the outset that AI is great and amazing. It's helping our customers faster and better. It's not replacing my team so far, really, at all, because it's given my team different and sometimes more meaningful work to be doing. And that's been great and excellent. So.
Yeah. And you wrote a great blog post about that, Matt. I know too.
Yeah, actually, I want to walk through that a little bit at some point. But Zach, we wanted to first show your customer data log.
Overall. Yeah. So actually, I used AI coding agent to make a script to kind of dump all the customer data just to figure out overall like what we're seeing stats wise. This is my chat GPT analysis. But basically I wanted to, it was hard because we had to filter out like people that aren't using it for customer support. We do have a lot of customers that use it for content generation or like for their internal team or personal research kind of use cases. So it's hard to kind of segment that. And then also we tried to only look at the most active bots that are being used for customer support. So when you look at a question only based performance, we did more than
Can you zoom in
a
a little
million.
bit on that, Aaron, just so it's
Yeah.
a little bit more legible for our folks?
Like a
Yeah.
lot of it,
Let's
yeah.
do that. Is
I'm a
that
Nice.
better?
size
Yep.
16 email guy. Yeah, or font,
Yeah.
yeah, 16 point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. There you go.
there we go.
Yeah, so more than a million questions processed, but it's interesting. So the AI determined it could answer 84% of it from the documentation it had been trained for.
Mm.
Um, so that leaves 12% that based on the training that people had set up, the AI couldn't answer.
And
And
I
then we
I I
also,
absolutely love Docsbot, and I'm a huge proponent. And, it's a little confident on the answers, like and there's not anything wrong with Docsbot. Any AI is gonna tell you this, like,
Mhm,
that it answered it successfully. Interviewing, in my experience, is more like probably 60% in terms of, like, an actual, like, really good answer.
mhm,
That's not to say that that's not incredible because it is, and Docsbot
Hmm.
still saves us a ton of time, like, it's great.
yeah,
And, like, these numbers might be a little higher, I don't know, like, I that's my experience at least. Yeah.
yeah, definitely, possibly. And you can tune like how sensitive that determination is from your
Hmm.
like custom instructions or custom prompt.
Oh, interesting.
Because some people say, like by default, I think the prompt is like that, like only classify it as could answer if you were able to confidently get an answer from the provided sources.
Mm, mhm.
So I mean that's kind of the best we can do, I think, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And some of it will depend on what AI model you're using. Whether you're using like a mini one to save costs and be faster, or you're using like full GPT-5, for example.
Yeah.
Which is better at classifying that kinds
Honestly,
of
that's
things.
a really good point because when we first did the Help Scout ticket integration part, we immediately were like, well, these aren't great answers. And I was like, well, you know why, folks? Because we aren't giving great answers in the first place. Um, so
Yeah.
the problem wasn't the AI in that case; it was the source material. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a big part, as I think you mentioned, is we found that like escalation is a huge thing. A smooth escalation flow, because you don't want ever to give a chance for your users to be frustrated. And so we have kind of built into our widget, if we're using it as a tier one support, to where it can seamlessly detect, if they get frustrated or if it can't answer multiple times, or if the user simply asks to talk to a human because they don't like AI or whatever.
yep,
It automatically says, okay, would you like me to connect you to a human? And then it
yep,
just shows a big button there and you click it. It tracks that data and it sends them to your support page, or it opens up your live chat widget and can even pre-fill it with a ticket based on the conversation that the user has already provided. I'm using AI. And so, but we track all that. And so when you're doing it based on questions only, we're seeing 2% escalated. Now, I think that's low. I tried to filter out everyone that doesn't have escalation enabled, but it's hard. There's a lot of different custom integrations people make with APIs and stuff to know.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I think
Great.
probably conversation based is the other thing that's interesting. Because with our new agent mode, we're recording the entire conversation and then we're doing classification based on the whole conversation, whether it was resolved or not. And there's an automatic kind of like feedback process where the AI is naturally asking, did that answer your question? And they can click positive or negative, or it just determines from their response after that whether or not the user is confirming that it answered their question or not. So that gives us a lot more tracking, because when it was just a thumbs up, thumbs down thing, users almost only just click thumbs down. No one's going to click thumbs up, even if it was a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with that, you have a pretty high answer rate, 94% for the conversation. And then for that, we're tracking resolved using AI classification for the whole conversation. And then we also track if a user confirms if it's resolved or not. And then escalations and things like that too. And sentiment is another big thing. So we're seeing like a 5 to 1 positive to negative, like sentiment, when we classify the conversations. That's pretty good. We're gonna try to do better like CSAT scores, so you can actually see, based on AI answers, what the true customer satisfaction is based on their responses.
Yeah, love it. We actually got a couple more good comments here from the crowd. Um, Actually, would love to hear. Oh, let's. Where did the? Let's get this one out of here. Yeah. So Nick McLaughlin says regarding replacing support, it seems more like a change in the interface of your self-service resources. I'd love to hear more about how, if this impacts the human support conversations that come after. Um, it's a really excellent question. That's been a guiding question for me personally as I've rolled this out. I've been, just for context, folks, I've been working with Aaron and Docsbot for, I mean, shortly after his public launch,
Mhm.
almost the whole time, honestly. And we did a real slow rollout. I really tried to refine our docs first before really having a lot of customer facing interactions, so that the responses from the bot would be really secure and things like that. But once we really finally rolled it out, that's when I got the really valuable information. And I agree by and large with the question behind Nick's question here, which is like, aren't you just basically making them read your docs? Like that's what Aaron was saying earlier. Nobody reads your docs. It's true. Now they just talk to your docs with a with a chat bot essentially.
Mhm.
But the truth is, that's what we always wanted. That, like, how many times did we get a question that it was just like, well, if you just would have read the docs, it would have been fine. Like you wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't even be asking this question. You wouldn't have filled out the whole entire support form if you just would have read the docs, right? So
Yeah.
now they don't have to. They get to conversate with the docs, and I've found overall that has been very, very true. that they get answers that are easy to answer a lot quicker than they would have if they would have submitted a support ticket and waited for us to reply to them with essentially saying, "Here's what it says in our docs."
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
And one of the ways that we're changing our support structure is that as AI gets better and better at answering support questions, and we're working really hard to do that, we also are reshifting our support priorities in order to spend more time on each ticket to make sure that every ticket that comes through the AI, like, answering filter, gets addressed with either a feature enhancement or a new doc or a bug report. We want to make sure that each one of the tickets that we are addressing is addressed so thoroughly that that won't need to be answered again. And
yeah,
it's not like the
Mhm.
support is going to go away, but I think that it's going from everything starts with tier one to kind of everything starts with tier two, or maybe
yeah,
even tier three in
yeah,
a year from now. And
100%.
so we're going to have to go, we're trying to transition more so that if a bug report happens, an issue is created automatically or very easily by the support technician. And then our AI bot tries to fix the bug automatically, and then our QA bot tries to identify whether it fixes it,
Test
and
it.
then our QA person verifies whether the QA bot was correct, and then the customer, within minutes even, might be able to have a fix to the issue that they had reported, and that kind of experience is coming soon if we do it right, and
Mm.
if we do it wrong, it's coming a little bit later than that.
A little bit later.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing that too. It's not that process isn't fully automated yet, but that's a great direction for Docsbot to where, I mean, a little feature request comes in or a little bug report, I just fire off an AI agent right then, and it's
Hmm.
working in the background in the cloud on my code, like coding that fix. The bottleneck I just got to get past now is the actual QA
Yeah,
testing part.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, Nick's in the comments here affirming what we're saying. He says, "Yeah, that mentality of how can I prevent this question from coming up again is crucial," and that's the point. That's the purpose here for sure. Um, Another good question we have is from Ian again. For smaller scale WordPress businesses like mine, is the cost savings significant enough to outweigh the potential customer success opportunities given up by resolving without the human touch? You know what? There's a couple parts to that question that I think are important and significant. For one, I don't think the cost is all that significant, Aaron. Right? I mean, pretty DocSpot is pretty relatively
Yeah.
affordable overall.
It starts
Listen,
at
y'all, look up other solutions, and
Yeah,
Docsbot you'll see is about 50 times less money than anything else on the market. It's a great
yeah.
value. Don't raise your prices, Aaron.
yeah.
I think
We have a couple
I
other
think
episodes about pricing smartly according to the market, Aaron. Maybe you should watch those.
yeah. We did just raise some prices. Sorry guys. But
Uh,
but we do start at 49 a month for just kind of to get started, and that's enough to get you going.
Yeah,
Like you mentioned, like Zendesk Intercom, I think they charge $1 per actual resolution,
interact. Yeah,
and we're
resolution.
talking;
which
those
is
are still the consumer grade stuff we're talking about. Maybe not Intercom, but like the big enterprise grade stuff is like thousands of
Mhm.
dollars per
Yeah,
month. Yeah.
and they often most of them, they require that you adopt their whole system. It's not that
Mhm.
you can
Mhm.
just that the reason why I landed on DocSpot and while I'm still using DocSpot is because it doesn't require that I buy into a whole entire support
Yeah,
desk ecosystem, a whole entire knowledge base ecosystem. It fits into my setup that I have.
yeah,
Looking into any of the other ones that I was interested in, like Sendbird, for example, is a really interesting platform that I've heard a lot of good things about. But in order to get the benefits from it, I have to buy into everything that they offer. If I'm going to have their chatbot interface, I have to have their help desk and their support knowledge base and all of those things. It's not portable and modular the way DocSpot is.
yeah,
But to Ian's question there about potential customer success opportunities given up by resolving without the human touch. The ones that it's resolving without the human touch are the ones that we keep saying over and over again are the ones that the humans don't want to touch in the first place. It's
Yeah.
it's
mhm.
those really it's
And our
those really
products
low
should
hanging
probably be
fruit ones.
better to prevent them from even having to be asked, or our
Yeah,
websites
Yeah,
could be clearer, yeah.
yeah,
yeah, and I
exactly.
think to be clear too, we have two different ways of kind of deploying DocSpot. We have kind of tier one and tier two. So tier one might be the chatbot that you have deployed in your product or on your website. And then that seamlessly hands off to tier two, which may be creating a ticket in your help desk. And in that case, like I think both of you are using the tier two a lot, or I'm not sure if Zach is using tier one, but tier two, basically Docsbot will write a draft response to the ticket in Help Scout. And
Yeah.
so it's still leaving it for a human to review and edit. So you're still kind of getting that personal touch, but it's doing, gosh, 90% of the work for me. And in my case, that's my experience, you know.
So my
Yep.
question about that, right? I've been going. We turned it on for a while, and that was back in the GPT-3 days, and then that was a mess because GPT-3 isn't GPT-5, right? It's not as
Mhm.
good as it is now. It's
Yeah.
quite good now, but there are so many nuances to customer support. Like, one of our customers, Craig, he emails every other day, right? We know Craig. Craig is a customer we know,
One of
we have a
those.
history with, like,
He's going to make it into the custom instructions. If you are Craig.
well, so
Yes.
one of the things that I wanna, incorporate is training Docsbot on our customers themselves, and, like, what type
Interesting.
of responses does this customer prefer? Is
Mm,
this customer technical? Is
mm,
this customer a repeating person
mm,
who is, a frequent user of our support
mm,
resources? And
Yeah.
I'm planning on having Docsbot be part of a chain that
mhm,
is part of that process where it looks up in our CRM about the
Uh-huh.
customer. How valuable is this customer in terms of
mhm.
historical value? Is this a pre-sale? Have they visited the site a bunch of times, but they haven't bought? All of this
Yeah.
nuance is something
That's
that humans
interesting.
can do really well, and
Yeah.
AIs can do really well, but it's not
Yeah.
incorporated yet in the flow of like
Yeah.
many of these types of systems.
Interesting. So we do have in our actual like native help scout integration, for example, like it's not getting past that data, it's getting past just their name and email basically in the metadata. But if you're using our API to integrate, or Zapier or Make or something like that to integrate it with your help desk, we do have the ability to add like metadata about the customer, about
Mm.
their
That's
plan
what
that they're
that's what
on,
we're
things
planning
like
on
that.
doing, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could have the customer even self-identify in terms of their technical aspects, and that could be passed then to the bot
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
in one
And
form
if
or
they
another.
Yeah.
mention the word filter, like
Mhm.
automatically we update
Mm.
their profile to say, or like if there's a opening PHP tag, we're like, okay, this person knows code, right? Like that's or is able to at least write an opening PHP tag.
Classify.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. I find, at least from the conversation context, because each time it answers a ticket, like in Help Scout, it has the whole conversation context. So it can determine a lot, about the user just from that, like how they're
Mhm.
talking, how they're communicating. We're using GPT-5 now, and that's one of the first like models that includes reasoning. And we found that so powerful. So for a Help Scout integration, we bump up reasoning. In a
Mhm.
chatbot context, you can't use that because you don't want them to wait thinking, right? But
Right.
Mhm.
when it's writing a draft to your Help Scout ticket, it has a lot more time to do that deep
Mhm.
reasoning. And we also input any screenshots that the user uploads
Yep.
or the staff member uploads in that conversation. That's all included as context for the AI model to do reasoning and to answer questions. And that's one of the things that always like it blows me away, the answers sometimes. And especially I get a lot of support tickets in Spanish or Japanese or
Mhm.
Portuguese, and
That's one of the
it's like
cool things. You get
crafting.
answers in
Yeah.
whatever language. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
great.
crafting this amazing answer, and even when I, like, Google Translate their question, like, I don't know what they're talking about, but when I translate the answer that DocSpot made, I'm like, "Okay, it understands a lot better what they're saying." Maybe that's cultural context, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
So
another amazing benefit that folks need to recognize is multilingual support without hiring a whole bunch of additional native speakers. It's really
Mm,
amazing.
one of the tips that we've implemented that I think others should do is in part of our prompt for the custom instructions for DocSpot, we have it score itself in terms of how deep it thinks the response should be, and
mm,
then before then saying, okay, if it's a quick response, respond quickly. Like that's something that GPT-5 already does. But if so, we enabled GPT-5, but we told the prompt to tell GPT-5 how much thinking it should do. So
that's very
we
smart.
kind of incorporated so that the chat is fast when it's an easy answer, and it thinks much longer when it's a hard question.
That's interesting. Another really good tip. I like
Yeah.
that. I did want to do a little show and tell myself, actually, real quick, if I could.
Sure.
I wrote an article just recently that I've been meaning to write for forever. The real power of AI in support isn't fewer tickets; it's better answers for more people. And you can check that on my personal website. But what I want to lean in on is just a little bit of the data that I collected. This is over a short period of time. This is only about like 2.5 months after we implemented Docsbot throughout the whole the events calendar ecosystem. So I'll just back up just a tiny bit real quick and just say that my rollout plan for each of the Stellar brands was that we had to use the bot internally first to validate whether or not the documentation was strong enough to give the bot good answers. And we did that for a long period of time. And then we rolled the chatbot out to only the documentation pages to start getting actual customer interactions, but only in the docs. So we know that they're looking for support in one form or another, and it's on the docs pages themselves. And then we monitored those responses and used those responses to improve the docs even more. And then once we felt like there was a good resolution rate shown in those interactions, then we would roll it out as either directly in the product itself, which we've done that now with the events calendar, where you can go into the help tab of the events calendar plugin in your WordPress website, and you get to interact with our Docsbot agent right there in your WordPress website. And this is that rollout that you see here, and you could see how the red line in particular is the one that is the chats that we have with Docsbot, and the support tickets are the yellow line. And you could see how they're already converging a bit, but what you also see is that the total number of interactions is increasing. And that's the part that I think is really important and fascinating to acknowledge, is that this, like I've said several times already, it's not reducing the number of team members that I need, but is greatly increasing the number of customers I'm actually serving without negatively impacting the capacity of my team. And that's what I really love about it. We actually are getting more answers to more customers without demanding more of our team, essentially.
Yeah.
To me,
And
that's
when you have a support team that it's always frustrating when I talk to customers one on one, or like when I'm on a support ticket that with a customer that's been with us for years, they've been with us for 10 years, and this is the first time they've contacted support. I feel frustrated because I know that they've had questions about like how to do certain things, or I know they've been frustrated and they haven't found a way that unlocks their feeling that they can just ask somebody. They can just ask a support question. Docsbot, automated AI chats, things like that, make it so that the customer doesn't feel guilty to asking a question. And I think that that's a huge part of
Interesting.
it. And even searching documentation is a burden. And I think that having Docsbot and have it be a conversational thing, it unlocks our customers' ability to feel like they can ask a question without like causing any problems.
Yeah. And the questions they ask, they talk to a person, they're like apologizing. Oh man, I mean, I think it's about this. I'm not sure, but like you look at the questions I ask, and it's like cadence is broken. It's like they don't care. They're just like, give me answers. I'll say it
Yeah.
however I want to say it. You bot.
That's funny. Matt, have you found it the way you like hire and train your support team, is that different now that they're handling more like tier 2 level stuff than tier
100%.
1?
There was several good pointed conversations that we had where I said very specifically, folks, if you are going through our queue and looking for the easiest questions possible, that's not a long-term strategy for you.
No more
More
cherry
and more.
picking.
Yeah, exactly. If you're cherry picking, that's not going to do you very much favors in this job.
Though, if you're a procrastinator, that's a good way to get started on support. So, if you need a couple to get warmed up, go for it. I'm just any procrastinators out there. I hear you.
but the ones who really want to like level up and start doing more of tier 2 type support, like that's where all of it is going. So I mean, I'll be perfectly clear, like we're leveling up all of our people all along the way right now as we go. We want to keep everybody and keep it going strong. But I do think that that means that going forward, we're only hiring tier 2 folks. And that does have like a little bit of a limiting effect on the number of people that we hire in the future, for sure. So I think it's important to be realistic about that. But in my mind, it's still like what we have been saying is that if you're hiring somebody who's really only doing low hanging fruit things that they can answer in like 20 seconds or less all the time, it's not a fulfilling job. If that's how they spend 6 to 8 hours of their day, they're not going to stay with you long because who wants to do that all the time? They're going to be looking for new opportunities. Ideally, I train them to be a tier 2 technician, and there is more exciting work to be done. But in the long term, I'm really hoping that everybody is enjoying their job. They get to monitor the bot, they get to update documentation, they get to create pitches. We create pitches now for the product team based on customer feedback that we get. It's a much more enriching, holistic job than
And
just
I
tier
think
one
it
support.
aligns nicely with what the society as a whole is going to need to do. And when our support team is trained in AI, then they're able to become a junior developer. They're able to become a junior product person. Like that is what the future is where like, okay, I have this bug. I'm not going to have to hand it off to a developer. I'm going to start this process that might be automated or it might not be. Like right now, it might be a little more manual than it will be a year from now. But I want everybody to be enabled to solve the problem, not just report it. I want people to be able to fix the website if it's not clear enough that the language on the site is a little confusing. Like we should fix that. I think it's a more results outcome oriented future rather than
Mm.
just kind of spinning the hamster wheel of doing support, like pushing that rock up the hill and having it roll down. That is the experience of opening an inbox every day as
Mhm,
a support person,
mhm,
or it has
mhm.
been. Maybe now it's more like working on the product holistically and being more involved in other parts of the business, not just
Nice.
Mhm.
support.
Yeah.
Well, we have had a very riveting show,
I love
honestly.
support.
Yeah.
It's a great topic.
I think we all do, which is why it's been so great. But we do need to wrap it up. Aaron, every single episode we conclude by giving folks our best advice. So, what is your best advice for anyone thinking about implementing AI in their support operation?
I would say, like, there's a ton of like chatbot building tools out there now or agent building tools, but what's really important for this use case is kind of the back end management. As we've talked so much about, whether it's like having good logs and filtering and analysis, reports, ways to fine tune the answers easily over time. I think that's a big thing to focus on. And the other one is making sure it's a very smooth, like, handoff to a human so that you don't give users that a bad, I think, AI support deployment is the one where they stick up a chatbot, and that's all users can talk to, and you just see them saying, "I hate AI," bot, 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 whatever. If you don't have that smooth process to hand off to the human team, um, I think those are my two tips. I think that I've learned from our customers.
Love it. Zach, what about you?
Well, one of the things that we had customers asking frequently about was our change log. Like they saw an email come in that we talked about a new product and they wanted to know more about it. And they would ask the bot. And because EDD is set up in a certain way, the change log wasn't exposed publicly. Uh,
Mm,
I added a changelog endpoint to our products that is nicely formatted and has all the latest information. And then I added that to the Yoast sitemap so that Docsbot can scrape our changelogs now
nice.
and has the latest information on all our releases. So my best advice is don't forget your changelogs. Make sure they're being indexed as well.
Well, that's good. We do that as a feed, as a category on our blog,
Mm-hmm.
that we use to index.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, my tip is, yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to one. I do think my tip is to focus on docs. Focus on your docs as much as you can. I agree with Aaron, like he said in the outset, like people don't read your docs, but you focus on them because they should be the backbone of any support interaction that you create through AI. And you also create them because they're really great for gaining organic traffic still. And it's also a really excellent exercise for your team to increase their knowledge of your product. So there's just so many benefits of online documentation for your support team. I know some teams they have the marketing team or the product team to do online documentation. I really think it's got to be support. Like you got to get
Mm,
them involved in writing and editing and updating and tweaking and reading all of the docs as much as possible because it just there's so many like lots of benefits
Yeah.
that just pile up on top of each other. So
And Ian
start
and
there.
I had a great conversation where he was saying there's a concept called knowledge-centered support or
Mm,
knowledge-centered service, where every interaction that somebody has with customers support should result in docs changes or product enhancements or like
mm,
an action. And that's really tough. But that's an approach to support is like every single time there's a question, make sure that your docs are updated or added.
yeah,
Yeah.
love it, love it. Great. Well, Aaron, how about tell everybody where they can find you and where you are on the web?
yeah, I'm really active on Twitter. My handle is Ugly Robot Dev, and I'm kind of building in public there, so always sharing the stuff I'm learning, whether it's marketing or support or AI technology things. And of course, Docsbot.ai if you want to sign up, give it a try with your own support. And
And for those of you who have AI transcription enabled, it's docsbot.ai.
yes,
It is not a
not dog
spot.
spot, right?
No.
Dog spot. Dog spot.
Yeah, I had to
Well,
put that
thanks
in
again.
my like keywords to autocorrect for me.
That's fun.
Thanks again, Aaron. And next week, we're going to be talking about the art of handling feature requests, which is a very related topic, with Robbie McCullough from Beaver Builder. So make sure to tune in next week.
And if you're enjoying these shows, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Literally, it's the freest, easiest way you can support the work that we're doing. Built something awesome this week, and we will see you all next week. Thanks so much.